Okay, well, this is what's called a dictaphone's lament. It's a song by Tycho. It's called Dictaphone Lament, and it's about, well, a dictaphone lament would be basically someone who talks to a tape recorder or a recorder all the time, like as its best friend. Like, like instead of talking to someone on the phone, I just talk to the microphone on my cell phone. So I have all these YouTube videos and crazy audio cassettes that I mix up. It's not that bad. I do have friends. But that's what the song Dictaphone Lament means. But no one ever pays any attention to what I'm saying. And then they ask questions, and I'm like, okay, I guess what I said was boring. And then I see someone took the idea. I'm not saying it was my original idea, but I'm saying it's like then they take credit for it, and I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to take credit for it. But what I wanted to point out was I've done this before. I've had a Facebook dictaphone lament, and basically was regarding Generation X, and that we've already proven essentially as much as a theologian needs to know that much as I had predicted, and many, well, I don't know any others that did, the children of Israel is a play off words. That Generation X, specifically the Generation X, although I don't believe that the years have to be 61 to 81, because a generation is not necessarily dictated by only 20 years. The word generation means cohorts. So, actually, by real definition, if you were alive at the same time and remember the same things that another person remembers, you are part of that generation. So someone could be 70 years old and you could be 20, and you're actually considered part of the same generation in a historical context. And I think in the Bible, when they say generations, they mean 82 years or something like that. So we're talking 5 or 10 years. But this is an unusual group, and I always knew there was something unusual about them. Now, initially, their name was not Generation X. Okay, they had been labeled before they were even born, because the baby boomers had been noticed after World War II. They were known as the 13ers. And that's because they were the 13th generation since Benjamin Franklin of the United States of America. So they already had been labeled the 13ers. At some point in the 80s, and Stuart Copeland wrote a book about it, Billy Idol had a band, there's a lot of different theories on how they got their name. That was then changed to Generation X. Now, the theory that I had heard about this was totally different than anyone else's that I've heard of. The problem was they couldn't sell products to us on Madison Avenue. We weren't programmed right. So when they were talking about X, they were talking about it as a mathematical equation. Purely mathematical. How much money are we going to make off of profits? We don't know. There's an unknown factor. There's something about this generation we can't figure out. We've been able to figure out every other generation, but there's an X factor here. And that actually came about on Madison Avenue, who was losing billions of dollars and losing business because people weren't buying cars. People were not buying stuff if the commercial was too cheesy. I think it was Isuzu that had a commercial that was so corny, trying to make fun of the slacker attitude, that people stopped buying Isuzus. And so they actually lost money. They didn't just not sell cars. Okay, but watch this. The 13ers, which is what Strauss and Howe, who now have the generational theory, they talk about the fourth turning. This is something you need to look up. It's very important. It's the biggest news that no one's talking about besides the awakening. The fourth turning is what we're entering now, and everything that they predicted years ago, it hasn't happened exactly, but they use non-psychic abilities. They use patterns. They patterned out how the Revolutionary War, and then about 72 years later, we then had the Civil War, then 72 years later we had the World War II, and now it's 1945, okay? So something is going to happen. The election of Trump clearly signified that. Go on YouTube or anywhere and look up the fourth turning, Strauss and Howe. And in 1991, when this book came out, and it's a heavy read, I'm lucky I got a hold of the book. The book's prophecy. But it predicted that around the turn of the century, around 2001, they predicted a large event was going to happen. And people said, like, what? Well, I don't know, like it's if a terrorist lit off a nuclear bomb inside of a big city. Something big is going to happen like that. Like, that's how close they are to predicting the future. And we're now entering this fourth turning. But they are giving a lot of credit, or importance and value, I shouldn't say credit, to Generation X. They're basically saying we're carrying everybody, and we're not getting any credit for it. That 9/11 was our disaster, like the baby boomers had Kennedy, that we were the ones that went to Afghanistan and Iraq, that when we made all the money, that's when, by coincidence, they made up a story about giving bad loans at banks, and all the people that lost money during the mortgage crisis were only Generation Xers. In fact, they're the only demographic that has not recovered from the 2008-2009 crisis. And that was right when we were coming back from the war. So we were the exact opposite of the Greatest Generation, except we did what the Greatest Generation did, except there was no roses and parades waiting for us. And that's going to continue, and they've been accurate with saying that. So they like calling us the 13ers for many reasons, but one is because 13 conjures up the concept of bad luck, that we're cursed. But interestingly enough, in ancient numerology, the number 13, all numbers do have meanings, okay? In ancient numerology, this is going back, millenniums, all right, back to Egypt. 13, the word 13 means the word real, means authentic. You're authentic and real. 33, for example, means true, honesty. So there's a little bit of a difference there, you see what I'm saying? But 13 means they keep it real. And that's so fascinating because during the peak of our generation, an online study showed that the words most commonly used by anybody, any age, was the word real. So during the 13ers generation, the word real was used more often than any other word. This is also interesting because I had always believed that the children of Israel didn't have anything necessarily to do with Jews. But in the Bible story, I believe that the description of the children of Israel was talking about Generation X. And that it was talking about the United States. That seems to have been the case. Now, with the Mayan prophecy, okay? Again, the end of time. The word Mayan, alright, the word Mayan means illusion. So the Mayan calendar would mean illusion of time. Alright? Now that's right when I predicted that we were going to see numbers on the clocks change. Like 11:11 and 12:12 and all that. Okay, so something did happen with time. The illusion of time, the Mayan calendar, the Mayan prophecy. But also within the Mayan prophecy, it says it will be the return of the wise ones or the elders that they labeled the 13th generation or the 13th Ahau. So did the Hopi Indians. So now we have in the Mayans, 13th Ahau. We have the 13ers labeled by the U.S. initially calling Generation X the 13ers. They changed that to mean X. Okay? Which is interesting too because X also represents, I didn't realize that an X as much as a T represents a cross. This is amazingly referenced like in U2 songs where they talk about our generation. Before we got the term Generation X, U2 references in the song God's Country the children of America being part of Generation X. That was in '86. We weren't even called anything yet. It was going to be the 13ers. Now look at this. 13er. Now if you use even more magic on it, and you spell that backwards, what do you get? Real. So we're talking about the real ones, the authentic ones. The authentic generation is Generation X. And I believe that the X factor is latent power. I'll explain that later. But what I'm saying is this is how I do my math. I don't know how to do mathematics that well. But the 13ers, keep in mind also, when you see writing, the prophets of the... what did Simon and Garfunkel say? And I believe that was the first song talking about our generation. The words of the prophets shall be written on the subway walls. Okay, let's say you have a gang. KHS. Knucklehead Bloods, I knew them. You'll typically see that what? Times 3. Everything's times 3. We are the descendants of Egypt. If you want to make a connection with past lives of a certain era or time, there is no doubt in my mind that Generation X is the return of the Egyptians. Now that may be good or that may be bad. But we also have triangles involved here, we have pyramids involved here, we have the Illuminati involved here. The Illuminati is us. It's not rich people. Okay, they switched up names. They're tricking you. Dark, evil people would not call themselves people of the light. The Illuminati are Generation Xers. Doesn't matter how much money you make. And they keep it real. We could make more money than any other generation, yet we turn it down. When we lost all of our money during the mortgage crisis, did you know that we not only didn't stop giving money to charity, every other generation stopped giving money to charity, dropped off big time. Our generation increased the amount of money it gave, and we got hit the hardest. So badly that even at this age, 33 or some percent of Generation Xers, which now are basically between the ages of like 33 and 53, still live with a parent or a friend of the families because of the economic hits they've taken. No other generation has taken economic hits like this. Obama, who got into office purely and solely on the Generation X vote, when we were the generation that said what? Our vote doesn't count. And for the first time ever, I mean, I don't think it's Obama, I think someone controls that guy. A piece of legislation was signed for every single group, even Republicans. It's a tradition that they do in Washington. Every single group got something signed into law for them. We wanted college loans like to get help. Remember that? The only people that did not get any benefit whatsoever by the Obama administration at all was the biggest demographic and the one that got him into office, Generation X. It was deliberate. It had to be. And those are all facts. I can back all those up. We have the highest education. We have the quickest reaction rates and problem-solving skills of anyone, even coming out of the Air Force. They don't know why that is. They test us coming out of into the Air Force, and we can do these things. A rapid eye movement. We can solve problems quicker than anyone else. I mean, listen to me talk. Do you know why? The Air Force figured out why. Why? Because we played video games our whole life. Rapid eye movement, quick coordination, having to solve problems, going and finding the treasure in Legend of Zelda. They stole all our ideas. Look at Napster. They sue the guy, then they take his idea and they threaten to put us in jail if we use our generation's idea. I've even heard that texting, that they observe us now, that we're somehow under a microscope, we probably are, and that we're so brilliant that what these companies are doing is they're basically copying, or they're taking the things that we're doing and we won't make money on because we're real, and then they're selling them to us. Does that make sense? So you get arrested if you paint graffiti on the side of a bus or above a urinal. Now look, the sides of buses have ads for banks. Even above urinals at a bar, where guys used to say, you know, for a good time, call Jenny. They now have advertisements. But if you write over that and you don't pay them for it, you'll go to jail. We have been so punked, you don't even have any clue. And, hey, the proof is in the numbers, right? There's my lament.